Most people walk past it without hesitation, believing that an ordinary can on a supermarket shelf requires no explanation and carries no story worth telling. What almost no one realizes is that this object represents the final outcome of a process that begins before sunrise, unfolds under extreme precision, and operates without tolerance for delay or error. This is not simply a story about food, but rather a story about timing, irreversible decisions, and systems designed to function perfectly, even when no one is watching. Once this process begins, there's no opportunity to pause, reset, or correct what has already been set in motion. If you want to understand how something so ordinary hides a process this demanding, subscribe now and continue watching, because the reality behind it is far more intense than most people ever imagine. Long before any factory activates or any machine begins to move, the most critical decisions are already being made in complete silence under the first light of day. In the fields, every tree holds fruit that exists within an extremely narrow window of perfection, and that window closes far more quickly than most people would expect. Harvesting too early permanently compromises flavor, while harvesting too late destroys structure, and no technology that exists later in the process can repair either mistake. Each fruit is evaluated individually through experience rather than speed, because a single incorrect decision will affect everything that follows. The moment the fruit leaves the tree, time becomes the most valuable resource in the entire operation, since temperature, handling, and movement immediately begin influencing quality. Transportation does not function as simple logistics at this stage, but instead operates as a countdown in which every minute carries measurable consequences. Convoys move with urgency toward facilities designed to absorb uncertainty and transform fragile agricultural variables into consistent outcomes. All of this effort exists so that someone months later can expect the same taste and texture without ever considering how much pressure was required to achieve that reliability. If this level of precision and responsibility changes the way you think about what seems simple, leaving a like helps this story reach others who have never considered what happens before the shelf. Once the facility doors open, the pace of human decision-making disappears and is replaced by a system that operates faster than any individual could ever manage alone. Inside this environment, fruit is no longer treated as produce, but instead becomes a sequence of measurable variables that must align perfectly to move forward. Every incoming load is weighed, recorded, and evaluated against strict numerical thresholds that determine whether the process will proceed or stop immediately. Sugar concentration is not estimated or assumed, but precisely measured using instruments capable of rejecting entire batches within seconds. Cleaning is not performed for appearance, but rather to eliminate any element that could compromise safety or stability later in the process. Water pressure, chemical balance, and exposure time are controlled with precision, because excess force or insufficient treatment can permanently damage the product. Inspection systems analyze each individual unit at speeds far beyond human perception, removing anything that fails to meet exact specifications without hesitation or exception. The removal of the outer layer represents one of the most delicate transformations in the entire journey, because the underlying structure must remain completely intact. This stage relies on exact chemical concentration, exact temperature, and exact timing, since even minor deviations cause irreversible damage. Once this transformation is complete, throughput accelerates rapidly, and the system no longer has the flexibility to slow down or recover lost time. If you stop watching here, you miss the moment when this process becomes truly irreversible. So stay until the end to understand why there is no turning back from this point forward. When the core is removed, the product crosses a threshold from which return is no longer possible, and preservation becomes the sole objective. Sweetness is engineered through carefully calculated ratios that ensure consistency across millions of units, because imbalance at this stage undermines everything that follows. Heat is introduced with precision, not to destroy the product, but to stabilize it against biological and chemical changes that would otherwise continue indefinitely. Temperatures must be high enough to neutralize enzymatic activity, yet controlled enough to preserve structure, color, and texture without compromise. Containers move through the system in synchronized flows, sterilized and aligned before receiving contents that must meet exact volume and spacing requirements. Air removal is mandatory because the presence of oxygen would allow deterioration to continue even after sealing. Vacuum sealing transforms thin metal into a protective barrier that isolates the interior from external influence and slows the passage of time itself. Pressure chambers close around hundreds of containers at once, filling the environment with steam under carefully calculated conditions. This stage allows no shortcuts because insufficient exposure permits survival of microorganisms, while excessive exposure permanently degrades quality. When the chambers open, what emerges is no longer seasonal fruit, but a stabilized product designed to remain unchanged, long after its origin has disappeared from memory. If you want to see how this system proves that every prior decision was correct, continue watching, because the final verification determines whether the entire journey was successful. After the heat subsides, trust is replaced by verification, because nothing at this stage is accepted without confirmation. Declared weights are checked against actual contents with zero tolerance for deviation, while acidity levels are measured to ensure long-term stability and safety. Sterility tests observe whether any unseen failure survived the process, since even microscopic errors can invalidate months of work. Despite advanced instrumentation, human evaluation remains essential because machines cannot assess sensory experience or consumer expectation. Experts evaluate appearance, aroma, texture, and flavor to confirm that the final product matches the promise established at the beginning of the journey. Only after every parameter aligns does the system release the product into packaging, distribution, and transportation networks. Months later, a can is opened in a kitchen, far removed from the fields, factories, and pressure chambers that made that moment possible. The journey ends quietly and successfully only when the experience matches expectation without requiring explanation. After understanding how much control, timing, and irreversible decision-making occurs before that moment, the question becomes unavoidable. Does knowing the process increase your confidence, or does it make you reconsider what convenience truly represents? Share your perspective in the comments, because the most valuable insights always come from the discussion that follows.